Hey everyone, what's up? This is Uri for Guerrilla Poker, and in this video I'm gonna play 3 tables of Zoom 200, and we'll see how it goes. And as always, focus on reads and note-taking and adjusting. If there is too much action and I need to talk about something, I'll just pause the other tables. So basically, we can just note that this guy c-bet 33% on King Jack 3 suited. Try to think as what does this note mean and why am I taking it here? I range check because I have a cold caller. This is a board that you can bet. Specifically, I like simplifying to a range check. And of course, we call here, and we have to notice that due to the tightness of positions, this hand might actually be a turn fold. He bet third pot 3-way. And yet, once we don't fold turn, don't think this is even worth a river bet, so I'll just try to show it down. And hopefully you guys are still thinking about what I was asking you before. So, really weird bet, right? What would you bet like this that you bet flop check turn? I would say ace 10. Let's actually sit out and discuss jack 10. Wow. So really interesting. Okay, so we have a bunch of stuff to discuss. So this went check, check. Again, I check most of my range, so it's actually fairly reasonable for me to just go very aggro on a turn with a hand like king, queen. So overbet, because I'm going to have all the over pairs there. Okay, so 2 things to discuss. First off, someone goes third pot on king jack 3 two-tone. Why is this relevant? Well, to say it's relevant, you have to know that this is not the ideal size. So the fact that he goes third pot here means very likely this is a guy who's simplifying to go third pot everywhere. And if he's simplifying to go third pot everywhere, that has some strategic implications. Generally, he's going to be c-betting too much on a bunch of boards. You want to attack him with some check raises. And like you can take all these things just from this third pot c-bet. So the note, if we're saying is, and one of the questions we're going to ask is, does he do this multi-way? Does he do this on boards where he has a low betting allowance? Because here he can range bet 1/3, it's fine. But some other boards like, king 6-7 two-tone, he can. So very interesting to see how he plays the rest and whether this turns into a leak. Now, our other player with jack 10 went 33% river nuts into perceived catcher heavy range, and he went stab 33 check with open ender. So both of these are, we call puzzle pieces. Imagine, you might have thought, or I might have thought, that his river bet is nice to check raise, and maybe I get there with something like king jack or pocket jacks, etc. So important puzzle piece for the future, so I'm not ever tempted to do that, right? Whereas if he goes big in that spot, maybe that's the cue to check raise. This hand feels like it could sometimes check raise and sometimes check call. And now we're generally going to have to fold turn, facing a big bet and facing a non-huge bet. So this bet, king jack, is actually a little bit close. Had he overbet and king queen is close here, maybe king jack is close. I think it's probably fine to fold. And I mentioned many times on this channel that I don't mind making like a big read-based hero call, but with no reads and no further information, I think a good default is to start out overfolding, especially at lower stakes. You're more likely to be correct overfolding than overcalling, I would say, as a broad general statement. But of course, there are a lot of exceptions, and a lot of the art in poker is recognizing those exceptions. So here we all the 3-bet with ace-9 suited. We get a board that's not so bad for the small blind, because small blind flats a lot of offsuit broadways to the 3-bet. And facing this quarter pot bet, In most position pairs, this would be a fold, but I think here it's something between a raise and a call. I'm not mistaken, so we'll click call. We'll have to bluff the river if I get to the river with this hand. This is certainly far from a guarantee. And we face the third pot turn bet with a hand that's just a gut shot, that like this hand is just a fold, generally speaking. As is this hand. So I'd love to bluff raise, but generally speaking, you're supposed to take your bluff raises from your calling range. So if you were in super hyper redline mode, you could say maybe just take it anyway. But if you want to stick to being more solid, the adjustment, if you think it's a good spot to check raise bluff, which is debatable, but if you do, you just take a higher frequency from the legal check raise bluffs, but don't add illegal check raise bluffs. So that hand would not be there. Could also make a bet there. And here, think versus a min raise, we get to defend. And relatively good board, big blind versus UTG, because he shouldn't have 3s and 5s as often as us, and he min raised, so we get to have deuce 4 and 3-5 suited. Yeah, here we'll check again. I could also bet. In this hand, I'm going to go for a big check raise and take it from there. So this is a board where if our opponent is going range bet, he definitely cannot have full frequency bets here. Okay. So good turn, we turn an open-ender. Doesn't improve too much if our opponent's calling range like a king or a queen would. So definitely great card to continue, and we'll fire. This is what's called an E-sized bet. So it's setting up something geometric where we bet almost pot on the turn and we're going to have roughly pot behind left on the river. And this is a hand that doesn't have to fire rivers. I feel like it can fire or not fire, sort of, if we get here. And the 3 river is actually a relatively good one, surprisingly enough, because some of my bluffs are going to have a 3. So now it starts getting more hard to get bluffs, and I think I just fire and hope, sort of, and we'll see how it plays out. And we get snap called by ace-king, which is very, very surprising. So, again, we're going to sit out, and in the pit of my stomach, I feel bad, because, you know, I bluffed and I got snap called by a hand that should probably have folded the turn in his shoes. So, it does feel a bit bad, but the focus, as always, is going to be on the future, and we're going to note the hand. So it's 5-3 suited A3. And now, and in theory, right, and this is the advantage of knowing theory, I know this is very far from a snap call. It's okay to call, but when I go for this line, he's not beating any of my value hands, and he's not interacting with my range in any meaningful way. So it's just as good of a call as something like ace-queen or ace-4, and it should fold a decent amount of the time. So the fact that I get called on the turn and on the river and snap called makes me think that this guy is probably stationing, and I don't know if it's me or the situation, but I don't think there's anything special about that board and that run out that should make him do that. So I'm going to venture and say that he's either stationing in general or stationing against me. I think both of them are, you know, reasonable enough and just important for me to know for the future. Right, so in the future, I'm going to be more careful constructing my range, starting from the flop check raise and the turn barrel and everything. Here this hand can, something like bet turn check behind river. You don't generally want to bluff busted flush draws on the river, although here it's less of a concern due to the fact that my opponent shouldn't really have his own busted flush draws. But he might. He might have king, queen of spades, king, jack of spades, so we block folding range. So I'll give this one up. generally speaking, you should be giving up busted flush draws most of the time. And here looks like we went bet flop, turn goes check check. I think it's reasonable to fire a river bluff, river then bet, but you don't have to. See? Yeah, nice. Okay, and King Jack, our opponent opens, we call. He gets one of the boards which he can see bet. So given that, we have to be more careful facing a check than usual. But you have to be careful anyway. In these positions, a lot of guys are going to do something similar to me, which is just check everything, and then something like King Jack is not as strong as it might be. And he really split his range. But yeah, half pot turn makes me think that our hand is a decent shot of actually just being the best hand. Queen Jack here can bet or check. We'll check the turn. And facing half pot, I'd venture to say this is somewhere between King Jack plus and Ace King plus for him, but the King is relevant for us, so we kind of have to bluff catch. And again, we see a surprising hand, right? So our opponent went 50% out of position, not flush, not the usual size. Feels like people are, this is sometimes 3-bet, sometimes call, and it looks like the tables are slightly lagging again. And here, this is actually a small 3-bet, so usually people go something between 4 and 5x, this is smaller, so I think we pure call. 10-9 suited, which usually you would mix and folds with. And I'm not excited about bluffing because I block 10s and 9s. And when we turn an open-ender, but if the cards are 4 flush. So it's not a very exciting open-ender. It's probably still good enough to call, just about. So here we 3-bet. It starts with a third pot, or fold the river here. Good look to bluff shove with something with a club sometimes. And 7s here on the turn, I think it's one of those interesting solver type bets where if I bet 7s, he's probably folding 9s and calling 6s. So it's an interesting hand to bet. Yeah, I'll check it back, but it feels close. I'd be curious and not super shocked if this is sometimes a bet. And then here on the river, so his size doesn't really fit for worse hands than mine for value. I think his bluffs should be mostly in the Broadway region. 7s is actually decent blockers by the river because 6-7 got there. So it's like theoretically as maybe a slightly winning call. I'm trying to work it through in my head quickly as we, so again, just to walk you guys through it, it's like, you know, it is the fact that I have 2 red 7s good or bad. So given position pair, he shouldn't have a 7 of hearts. He could have 6-7 suited and that's a nuts by the river. So I don't really block bluffs at all. All the bluffs are going to come from stuff like Queen Jack suited, King Jack suited, King Queen suited, Ace Queen, etc. So in theory, I think the hand becomes a call. I don't beat any value. Here I think with a recreational and a big blind, a presumed recreational, we get the call versus a min raise. And here again, we get the third pot on a board that's not really a third pot board, but worth a note. And yeah, let's up here min bet this on the river, and we'll check this. Okay, okay, guys, thank you everyone for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I think there are some nice takeaways, and one of them is that, you know, you shouldn't be afraid to run bluffs. But the important thing when you do run a bluff is that you learned from the showdown about, both your opponent and maybe the situation, but collect information, and maybe over time you realize which spots work for you and which don't. It could be metagame related, it could be, related to your image, but in a way that your opponents are teaching you what doesn't work, and you have to be cognizant of that over time as you play. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.